Hello, my name is Andrew Morrissey. This is my final project for CSCI E63 Big Data Analytics. The topic is Plotly, a collaborative data analytics and visualization tool. More specifically, I'll be showing a demonstration of the Plotly R API. The agenda: I'm going to give you an overview of the Plotly software. I'm going to talk about what it does and what products it has available. I'm going to give you an overview of my demo. I'm going to talk about my dataset. I'm going to talk about importing and manipulating data with R. I'm going to show you how to make plots with the Plotly R API. And I'm going to show how to embed those plots into HTML to make the final product. And at the end, I'm going to have a brief recap of what I told you. So the Plotly software. As you may expect, Plotly makes plots. More accurately, Plotly is a collection of several products, including an online workspace, APIs, and libraries, and figure converters. All their products are aimed to enable collaborative, interactive data analytics and visualization. And it's worth noting at this point that there's a free online version for personal use that's hosted on the web, and there's an enterprise version that is hosted on an internal server within a company and is paid service. The plot that we're looking at here is just an interesting plot that I took off of the Plotly feed. If you'd like to go look at it interactively, I encourage you to check out the link on the right hand side. Next, we'll talk about some of the collaborative features of Plotly software. Plotly has several features that promote collaboration. First, each plot is given a unique URL that can be shared. Second, other users can edit or comment on your plots if the correct access is given to them. And third, the data can also be viewed from a plot's URL. So you can share a plot, another user can navigate to it and actually see the data behind the plot as well as interacting with the plot itself. On the right hand side, we're looking at the sharing settings. You can see this is for one of the plots that I made. You can see it's set to public, that you can see its URL. There are some social media features, which I haven't explored too much. The embed is to create HTML code to embed into a website. Below that, you can see who's the owner. You can add collaborators, and you can set email notifications. Next, we're going to take a look at the online workspace. So this is the place that I would recommend for someone to get started with Plotly. There's grids, which will be pretty familiar to anyone who's used Excel in the past. You can import data into a grid and then pretty simply make plots. Since I'm recommending this is the first place for someone to check out, I'm actually going to go to it myself right now and show a quick example from scratch. So go into Plotly. I'm logged in as my username. I'm going to go to the workspace. I'm going to make a new grid, and I'm going to add data to the grid. What we're looking at here is all the CSV files that I downloaded for my demo. I'm going to choose the pitching.csv database, which is a fairly large file, I guess 3.7 megabytes. I'm going to open that within Plotly. It'll take just a minute here. But while it's loading, we can look at the different plot options. You can make line plots, scatter plots, you can add fits, make bar charts, heat maps. There are some 3D options. There's a lot of different options for plots. I'd like to make a scatter plot. So as I chose scatter plot, the options for a scatter plot came up on the left hand side here. By default, you have an X and a Y, but I'm going to choose to also have text. So I'm just going to give it one more minute here to load the data. There it is. Going to accidentally clicked on group. I'm not going to use group here. I'm going to use text, and if you see as I add text, it gives me an option to choose one of the columns as text. So I'm going to choose the player ID as the text, I'm going to choose the year ID as the X, and then I'll choose the Y to be wins. And I'll just click on scatter plot here and make that plot. Alright, and here's the plot. So you can see that in a pretty short amount of time you were able to take a pretty large CSV file, import it into the grid, and then make this interactive plot where you can interact with the X and Y axis. You can zoom in like I just did, and you have your hover over text as well, the player ID as well as the X and Y axis. So back to the PowerPoint. Alright, the next topic is Plotly's APIs and figure converters. Plotly also offers several APIs and figure converters, allowing you to utilize their interactive plotting capability with a wide variety of ways to prepare and read in the data. As I mentioned before, the R API is featured in my demo, but as you can see below, there's lots of different options. Python, MATLAB, Excel, etc. Finally, the last slide that I want to mention before going over the demo is the Plotly JavaScript library. Its name is plotly.js. It's the D3-based JavaScript library developed by Plotly to make D3 graphics more accessible to non-web developers. I didn't use a specific library in my demonstration, but I look forward to learning more about it going forward. Alright, now we're on to the demo overview. Again, for my demonstration, I decided to use the Plotly API for R. For fun, I decided to take a look at some baseball data, specifically the public stance that the Red Sox have against signing pitchers over the age of 30 to long-term contracts. I wanted to see if I could validate their claims. The technology that I used was R, including DevTools and Plotly packages, RStudio, an IDE for R, Plotly, including both the R API and interacting with the online features, and HTML to make the final product. The process I used was I downloaded several CSV datasets from Sean Lahman's baseball database. I read and manipulated the data with R. I used the Plotly API to generate several plots, and then I embedded those plots into HTML again to make the final product. Required setup. The tools needed to recreate this demonstration are R version 3.2.0, RTools version 3.1, RStudio Desktop version 0.98.1103, the DevTools and Plotly packages for R, and the free Plotly account. I have a note here that getting R, RTools, and DevTools to work together was a challenge. The specific versions listed are what I needed to get everything functioning. These versions don't necessarily line up with some of the documentation that you'll find online, so I would highly recommend starting with these versions if you're trying to recreate this demonstration. The dataset. There are many databases available online, but the one I chose was Sean Lahman's baseball database. It contains annual statistics for hitters and pitchers going back into the 1800s. I downloaded several CSV files from this website to be read in by the R script. Alright, reading the data into R. I needed to perform the following operations on the databases. Read them, join them. The databases were relational. For example, the pitching database had a player ID, and then you would have to go to another database to get the player ID's name and birth year. And finally, I needed to manipulate the databases. Several miscellaneous operations here, like calculating age, combining first and last names, sorting out the data on years, etc. At the bottom of the screen here, you can see some of the code where I'm reading in the CSVs, merging them, and doing some of these manipulations. Now that the data is in the format that we like, we can start making plots with the Plotly API. The code to make the first plot is shown here on the screen. It's sort of broken up into three groups. First, the plot data is defined, so the x-axis, the y-axis, the text, which is the hover over text, and then The type as a scatter plot is defined. Next, the plot layout is defined. So this has that we're turning the legend off. It has the title. It says do not have an auto size. Set the manual size to 800 by 600. And finally gives X and Y axis titles and initial ranges. And then the final piece is actually creating the plot. So it gives the plot a file name and a URL. And if you were to navigate to the URL, this is what you would see. But for good measure, let's recreate that. I'm going to pull up RStudio. I have all of the code up through plot 1 highlighted. I'm going to go ahead and run it. It's doing what you saw before with the R data manipulation, and it just created the plot. I'm going to get the URL for plot number 1. I'm going to copy that, put it right into Chrome, and you see plot 1. Again, it's totally configurable. It has the hover over text like we asked it to. All the features that you'd come to expect. So back to PowerPoint. The next 3 plots increased in complexity. There were multiple data sets. Between plot 1 and plot 2, I broke up the data into 5-year increments, so now all the plots have a data set for each 5-year increment. I created a size axis, and the code is shown on the right hand side here. The size is the size of the marker, and it's a function of salary, so as the pitcher's salary goes up, the marker size gets bigger. And now we have an interactive legend. So if you remember before, we turned the legend off. Now we are not. And the interactive feature is pretty nice, and you'll be able to see that later. Those are all positive. One downside is that the code did become somewhat verbose. I blame this mostly on my lack of experience with the API, but it certainly was pretty large. Alright, on to embedding in HTML. Once the URL for the plots are created, we can export HTML code to embed the plots in our page. On the bottom left hand side here, you see the embed code option that's in each Plotly plot. In the top right here, you see the an HTML division code created and the quick copy feature there. And you simply copy this division into your HTML, and your plot will be embedded. Let's take a look at how this process works. So this is one of the plots that we just created. We go to the bottom right hand side, click embed code. Here's the division. We do a quick copy. Go over to your HTML code, and you just copy that division right in. Note, for my project I made 2 divisions within a division. One with a width of 100%, and then the 2 with widths of 49%, one on the left and one on the right, so I could get 2 of these Plotly plots next to each other. But this division code came straight from that feature that we just looked at, the embed plot in your site feature. Right, back to the PowerPoint. Alright, now that our HTML code is written, we're ready for the final product, and you see that here on this page. The result is a pretty professional web page with totally interactive plots. We're looking at static pictures of the website right now, but to do it its full justice, we should navigate to the site itself. Note that there are 4 Plotly plots embedded, that they're all interactive. They all have the features that we were looking at before. You can turn off or on datasets, and I think the most interesting plot is the one that we're looking at in the lower right hand corner right now. If you sort just on pictures with 17 plus wins, and you sort out to only be looking at the most recent data, so only concerned with 2000 on, and actually just focus on the 2000 to 2004 data set first. Looking at the 2000 to 2004 data set, you can notice that there are 18 pitchers that are 35 and older with 17 wins. As you add in the 2005 to 2009 database, you notice that there are only 6 pitchers 35 and older with 17 plus wins. And when you add in the 2010 to 2014, you notice that there are only 3 pitchers that are 35 and older with 17 plus wins. So with this interactive feature, you can kind of get a better idea of the original goal here was to look at a statistical view of the Red Sox very public opinion that they do not want to sign starting pitchers over the age of 30, as they won't get their value from the ages of 35 on. And the sharp decline in 35-plus-year-old starting pitcher performance over the last 15 years seems to validate the Red Sox opinion. Back to the PowerPoint and the recap. Overall, I'm very pleased with the Plotly R API. It was a really fun experience to play with the MLB data and to make this HTML page. And it seems like we were able to validate the Red Sox stance on this issue. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to my presentation, and have a good day.